You ever feel like the other team made a player have a great game?
Oh,
Not
sure,
that the
yeah.
not that the player was just singularly great, but the other team played so dumb it played into the great player's hands, and he just happened to take it.
Hello and welcome to the Tampering Podcast, part of the Athletic NBA Show Network. I'm Sam Amick, NBA national writer at The Athletic, here with one usual suspect, Anthony Slater, Warriors beat writer extraordinaire, Kings, Lakers, Suns, et al. We got Eric Name in the house, Bucks beat writer, who gets an award today. Always willing to jump on the pod. But listen, I'm not in my playoff grind fully just yet. I got lucky. The Kings team that is in my backyard is in the playoffs, have not stepped on a plane yet. Eric Name is living a different life. He was at the Bucks Heat game very late last night, and I believe got maybe a grand total of 72 minutes sleep. Yet here he is, looking bright and bushy tailed, I think the saying goes, and willing to jump on to talk about. I don't, boys. Are we calling it a miraculous Heat win, an epic Bucks collapse, all of the above? My goodness, Eric, what a night at the arena.
I think it has to be one of the more unbelievable performances I've ever seen. And obviously, Sam, we covered the Bucks championship run together in 2021. I saw some pretty unbelievable things in all of those games. I saw Kevin Durant go for 50. I saw Giannis go for 50. Jimmy Butler going for 56 last night. I'm still struggling for the words because it's not like the Bucks are a bad defensive team. Uh, they're
That's quite the understatement.
they're very good.
Yeah.
Drew Holiday, just in our anonymous player poll, was overwhelmingly named the best defensive player in the NBA. Overwhelming. Brooke Lopez
Breach.
just finished in the top 3 of defensive player of the year. Giannis Antetokounmpo, former defense player of the year. I know, limited injuries. I get it. But still, that's a lot of really good defensive players. And I know some Bucks fans will say, like, oh, well, the first couple games, they were letting, Jimmy Butler shoot practice threes and all that stuff. That wasn't the case last night. They let Drew Holiday do everything that Drew Holiday likes to do. If he wanted to pressure Jimmy full court, he could. If he wanted to go over the top of screens, if he wanted to try to go for strips, if he wanted to switch, he could, all of those things.
Unleashed.
It did not matter. It did
Right.
not matter at all. Jimmy Butler had buckets for everybody. He had buckets for Giannis in the first quarter. He had buckets for Chris Middleton. He had buckets for Brooke Lopez. He had buckets for Drew. Like it was truly just an unbelievable performance. And obviously, you're looking at what was. It's not a must win until you actually have to win in my book. But man, if that wasn't a must win, that's about as close as it could have been. Now the Bucks down 3-1, heading back to Milwaukee. They do have 5 and 7 at home. But man, you can't feel real great about what the Bucks are doing right now because they just don't have an answer for Jimmy Butler.
Slater,
There
real
were
quick
two. There
before you jump in, Slater.
Yeah.
Sorry. Quick preview for the rest of the show. We are gonna dive into Lakers Grizzlies and then focus on Warriors Kings. That De'Aaron Fox news with his hand is obviously a very big deal. Those 3 series I think are going to be front and center. We might have another special guest on the back end of the pod. That's what's coming after this robust Heat Bucks discussion. Slater, go.
There were just 2 moments during the game from my living room. I was like declaring it over, right? It was 15-5 early. Giannis has that memory. I think it was on Strus, just like spin dunk. And then I think he had another quick and one. And I was like, okay, he's back. Not only does this game feel over at 15-5, the series kind of feels over in some ways. And then that's when Butler kind of announced himself in the game, right? What did he have? 22 first quarter points, I think it was. When he had that drive and dunk on Giannis, you're just like, okay, that this Butler showed up tonight. And then he does that first quarter, he keeps it a game. But then again, what was it? End of the third, it was like 11. I had something I needed to do, but I was like, can I declare this over? I want to see Lakers Grizzlies. Do I have to watch this fourth quarter? And then there was that sequence. Caleb Martin, I thought, was really big during that little stretch too. But also when Butler hit the 2 straight threes, and what did that get him up to 50 at that point? I think. That one was like, oh, okay, this is gonna get real tight for the Bucks down the stretch, and then obviously what happened happened.
Listen, man, this version of Jimmy Butler is wild. He's just wild. Like it gave me bubble flashbacks. It's funny, and I'm gonna do, we all like it when we get so many predictions wrong. It's fun when you get something right. So this is the part of the program that Slater sees coming, where I'm coming down his road.
It took 5 minutes. That's actually longer than I thought it was going to take.
5 minutes.
Sam Amick gets to take his victory lap. Wow,
Eric,
he
like
was
I said on
the
pod before, like I just have it imprinted on me from the bubble, as you know, that like that Bucks team was incredibly shook by Jimmy and the Heat, and there was a personal component. And for me, it's weird because I've enjoyed covering Giannis so much. But the arc of like one of his lower moments, when not only are you losing to the Heat in the bubble, but you are getting serious scrutiny when it comes to the question of why you won't guard him in key moments during the game. And I remember sitting, one of my favorite interviews in the bubble, sitting with Jimmy Butler at practice and getting a chance to ask him very directly, were you surprised that Giannis wasn't guarding you? And Jimmy's doing that thing that he masters, which is he doesn't really throw shade at people, but he just very kind of passive aggressively, puts all the scrutiny even more in their direction. So Jimmy was, just living rent free in the Bucks heads back then. And I know this is a different Bucks group. They won a championship. They grew up. They eclipsed all those moments.
Also destroyed Jimmy Butler. Destroyed in 2021.
Yes, which is why on this pod, Mr. Katz and Mr. Slater thought I was crazy for thinking Jimmy still had that in him. We'll see if they finish it. I'm going to now make the mistake of not respecting the Heat enough. If we're handicapping all of these, as we talked today, there's 3 games tonight that are 3-1 series. So of all these 3-1 series, I think a lot of folks might look at Heat Bucks and say, if any team can win 3 games in a row, it's Milwaukee, again, especially with home court. The numbers on that doesn't matter that much, but we've heard the stat about 95% of the teams that go up 3-1 win the series. Apparently that goes down a little bit if you have home court to 89%. Odds are mildly better, but the Jimmy experience is just fun, man. It is. It's fun. Like, he's not that guy all the way through the regular season. The playoff Jimmy thing that he pushes back against is very real. I mean, he's pretty damn good in the regular season too. But it was wild to watch. Eric, let me throw it to you this way. In terms of Bucks fans and what is, for lack of a better way of putting it, pissing them off today. One thing you certainly saw a lot of people talking about was during that late fourth quarter run, why does Bud not go ahead and call the timeout there and slow it down?
Yeah, I mean, I think over the years, and I got into this when I wrote that story about, the user to lose the timeout, which honestly ended up coming up last night. The turnover that Giannis has to give Jimmy Butler the dunk that gives the Heat the lead, he was trying to call the user to lose the timeout. Like, they were trying
That's right. Yeah, you wrote that.
In the middle of the floor. They were trying to, do the thing where they call the timeout, and it would have been a 1-point game, and Bud pointed towards the ref for the timeout. Giannis held the ball and looked at the other ref. They were about to call it, and then all of a sudden, ball gets poked out and it goes the other way. But the thought process from Bud has always kind of been like, I want those timeouts late in the game. I want to be able to compose our guys. I want to get us ready for the final 3 minutes of the game. And without all of that, like, we want to play through runs. And there are some coaches that believe the exact opposite of that, right? Like, Pop's gonna...
I'll just butt in here quick. Sam, I think it's pretty important to have timeouts late in the game. I think we
Butting?
learned that
you're butting
in the Warriors-Kings game the other day. Might be useful to have a timeout if you get trapped in the backcourt. Yeah. And might want to tell your players, or your players should know.
Man, I think
don't call that timeout if you don't have it. Sorry. It just
you just
having flashbacks,
sure
as Eric was saying.
You also got me thinking at the end of that King. Well, there's a different discussion. That end of that Kings game leading to the Harrison Barnes missed 3. I looked back on that and wondered, like, Mike Brown does call timeout. We'll never know, but what if he lets it rip at that point? But we're not on Kings Warriors just yet. I hear you.
Go ahead.
What's that, Eric?
I was gonna say, but like that's always like the inner dilemma, right? Is like, How
Okay,
do you
when you see the fire coming out of Jimmy's eyes and you see the horns coming out of his head and you see the fans doing backflips physically in the stands and the roof of the building is actually beginning to come away from the hinges and come off. I mean, I hear you, but no, you've got to
That
stop.
Miami crowd was hilarious to watch in itself last night. But like, separate from the
Why?
game was a
Why?
fun watch. Just the Miami nature of it all. And the fact that, that is known as in some ways some of the like a sleepier playoff atmosphere. Like they must be lit to get, a flame, but they were. And it suddenly turned into like a Miami
You are
version
just
of the
having
Kings
double
crowd.
entendres like crazy today.
I know that was a lot.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
But yeah, I mean, so like I think there's obviously the argument that like, yeah, you should take it. And I think the other argument would be, well, they took the timeout and what they do right after it. Giannis scored an and one on an ATO that they were able to draw up. They ended up scoring on the possession after that. They got a wide open three from Chris Middleton on the possession after that, and he missed it. They could have gone up 5 because in between all those scores, they paired stops. So if the Bucks just do the thing that the Bucks did in 2021 and show like, their championship medal, like everything that they had, because it would have been a Giannis and one, a Drew Holiday step back 3, and a Chris Middleton step into it 3. And all of a sudden they're up 5 after that timeout. Maybe it didn't look so bad. Like maybe your idea to compose your team did actually work. And again, I definitely understand second guessing it. Like call the timeout, stop the run. But also you weren't stopping Jimmy Butler last night. It doesn't matter how many timeouts you took. Like he was doing whatever he wanted to you, no matter what. So I think like to me, the bigger question is, and I asked Bud this after game 1, and to be totally fair, like Giannis played 11 minutes in that game. But to start that game, Drew Holiday had Jimmy Butler. And in 2021, when the Milwaukee Bucks dominated and destroyed the Miami Heat, 4-game sweep, multiple blowout wins, Brook Lopez was on Bam Adebayo, just like he is now. Giannis Antetokounmpo was on Jimmy Butler. And that was how you beat the Miami Heat. And Jimmy struggles with Giannis's length, and last night, like he got him a couple times, as Slater said. But overall, like if you're looking at the possessions where Jimmy Butler is truly uncomfortable, it's when Giannis covers him. And like you, I do have the flashbacks of instead of being in the bubble, being in my apartment and asking Giannis, "Hey, did you ask Bud if you could cover Jimmy Butler?" Like I have those same flashbacks, and in 2020, the answer was, why would you ask me that? You know that like I'm a help defender. This is what our scheme is. Like, of course I didn't. And then in 2021, the answer was, yeah, I wanted the challenge. Let's do this. And I showed why I should have been doing this last year. Like to me, it was funny. And it's very curious to me why 2 years later we would now see the Bucks revert and go back.
2020. How much of that is Giannis's physical state? Where is he at physically after the back, missing 2.5 games?
Yeah,
you wrote about a moment 6 minutes to go in the game, and it seems like he was struggling a bit.
How about just the end? He was like, how long was he lying on the floor when the game ends, and he was just lying there? Nobody seemed like they were coming over to help him up either.
Yeah, I mean, so it was one of those games where I think he just gave everything, right? Like it's in all of us have kind of been there for those moments because we covered the 2021 NBA Finals together. But like, Sam, you and I sat in the press conference after game 2 in Phoenix and wondered, okay, what just happened to Giannis? Because he stepped up on the podium once he was up there.
Post-game press conference podium.
He's sitting there and he just goes, I can't do this. And he walks off and he disappears for, I don't know, 30, 40 minutes. And then he comes back, and you and I were later able to report that like what he did there was he got an IV because he had given so much and his body had just kind of, there was nothing left in it. And I thought last night, we saw a lot of that. And he did not speak to the media last night. It was a similar situation where, we were in the press room waiting for Giannis at the podium, and then we're told that he wasn't going to be there. And I did find myself thinking back to that moment with about 6 minutes left. Giannis gets his 11th assist of the night. It's Giannis and Brook in the middle pick and roll. They're destroying the Heat with it. And they had just gone to it possession after possession. I think they had racked up 4 assists in the fourth quarter, those two in that pick and roll. And then Giannis throws a pass, and on his way back, he kind of grimaces, and then he does like a run that doesn't look like how anyone ever runs, like unless maybe you're going to the bathroom. Like his legs are like, just like real small steps. He's trying.
Kevin Love was kind of running like that at times yesterday. It seemed
right. Like,
yeah, it's because he's a middle-aged man. That's how we run.
So like you just saw it, and in my head, I was like, okay, I'm guessing those are cramps because he didn't grab at his back. It was, kind of the legs. And I mean, I think that plays into it, right? Like if you're asking for him to help you win this must-win game, and Giannis was spectacular last night, like to be clear, that's his third career playoff triple-double, scored efficiently, and just kind of controlled the game until those final 6 minutes. The Bucks went away from that offensively. They stopped running that exact same set that they've been running the whole fourth quarter to get that big lead. And after the game, there wasn't a lot of talk about it, but I would venture to guess that like they went away from it because they were just like, I don't know how much more we can count on Giannis to get us through this. And maybe he needs a little bit of a break and we need to move away from him. And that's the 3 minutes that we're talking about where this big run goes on, 13-0 from the Heat, and they end up getting the game.
Eric, when is game 5?
Game 5 is, if today's Tuesday, it's Wednesday.
Okay, so 1 day rest. That's not good for Giannis. This team better than anybody. What does your spidey sense tell you about whether or not they can beat the odds and recover?
I mean, I think in 2021, the Bucks went down 0-2 in Phoenix, and Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday came up to the podium and were laughing, right? Like they're like, yeah, we're good. Like we're gonna be fine. I didn't get that same sense last night. Like, I think they're really trying to figure out, like, what the fuck are we going to do with Jimmy Butler? Like, we haven't.
There's our headline right there for the pod.
Like, we haven't figured out how to stop him yet. What are we going to do? How are we going to stop him? And the answer truly might be as simple as just put Giannis on him. And that might
why
be
not, why not more doubles? And I know we're doing the armchair quarterback thing, but why there weren't a lot of doubles, not a lot of traps. Why?
No Tyler Hero too. Like, and Bam Adebayo does not look ready offensively for this moment.
Caleb Martin, by the way, just as a quick aside, your NBA playoff plus minus on court, off court point differential leader at the moment, right above Steph
Not
Curry.
Alex Lynn, huh?
No, Caleb Martin.
Man, Alex Len,
who even gave a little John Cena last night. You see that?
Yeah, after he hit that corner three.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, so I think this Bucks team over the years has been really big on, we're not going to give up a bunch of points to one dude and then everyone else. Like when they played the Nets in the second round in 2021, PJ Tucker goes on this big rant about how everyone's got to stop helping. KD's going to score. That's how it goes. Just don't let everyone else get loose and we'll be fine. And, Jimmy did have 56 last night, I think 2 assists, if I remember correctly. Like they didn't let everyone get both except for
congratulations.
Except for the biggest moment of the game when Caleb Martin hits 2 massive shots and all of a sudden they are getting both. Like those are the things that I think can happen. So that's always kind of been their tactical guidelines is, one guy, fine, we're not going to double, we're not going to send traps, we're not going to do all of that. We're just going to take away everyone else. And frankly, they've been unsuccessful doing that in this series. The Heat are shooting 50% from the 3-point line as well. Like they're not doing the other stuff that they want to do. So I just think it's a multi-level failure defensively to this point to have a team that was the 25th best offense in the league in the regular season score 120 every night. Like that's just it just hasn't been acceptable. And I think that if we're talking about how they win this, yeah, this is a team that I think is capable of very good defensive performances. If they string 3 of them together, all of a sudden they can win this series, but they just haven't shown any ability to be able to do it quite yet.
All right, my last thought here, and then we're going to take a break and jump into the other series. Jimmy was incredible. We got to give some flowers to. We talk about the depth of the Heat, Tyler Hero being out. Kyle Lowry with a massive steal late on Drew Holiday, where he just absolutely picked his pocket. And I alluded to the plus-minus game. Jimmy's the headliner. Jimmy's the hero. Kyle Lowry giving you a plus 18 performance in 23 minutes. Duncan Robinson, who has been sitting on the bench for most of the year, 30 minutes plus 15. And then Caleb, your plus-minus leader at this point in the playoffs, plus 16, giving you 12 big points as well. So, they are getting the kind of help we didn't think they could get. I saw somebody on ESPN today mention, like you're talking about, Jimmy and the band of undrafted misfits. It's just unbelievable, when you compare the rosters of these two teams. But guys are playing pretty well. Any final thoughts, boys?
I was gonna say all those dudes are stepping up, and I think overwhelmingly, like Jimmy's been unbelievable, but the Heat have also stacked on top of that these really strong performances from guys that just haven't performed that way in the regular season. Whether that's circumstance or opportunity or whatever it may be, like they just haven't performed that well, and they're killing it in the playoffs. And the Bucks have just been scrambling in all facets of what they're doing defensively, and it's because of Jimmy, but it's also because of the performances of all these kind of like you said, like these nameless guys or these old vets that are taking one last trip around the sun, and Kevin Love and Kyle Lowry, like all those dudes that have been really important to them thus far.
Isn't Bam Adebayo supposed to be like a superstar though?
I know Bam is not earning his money right now.
Just saying. I still think, and Sam may criticize me for this. I still think the Bucks have a very good shot to win this series. Now, Giannis needs to be himself.
Very good is strong. I'm not going to count him out.
But I just, 2 of the games are in Milwaukee. That it took 56 or whatever he finished at from Butler. I still think Miami's extremely limited, particularly offensively. I think Milwaukee can win this series still.
We shall see. All right, we're going to take a quick break, get into Lakers, Grizzlies, Warriors, Kings on the other side. Eric, I would not judge you in the slightest if you would like to run for your bed and to get some sleep. I would let you make the decision if you want to stay on and join us or not, but we will be right back.
Today's show is brought to you by our friends at First Leaf. Head over to tryfirstleaf.com/NBA show and save 50% on your first 6 bottles. I love this time of year. When the weather's getting warmer and I get to see my friends and family more often, whether we're going to meet up for a birthday party or a barbecue or we're just hanging out, I always want to have some great wine that I can share, and that's why I love First Leaf. As America's most personalized wine company, First Leaf just has completely taken the guesswork out of my wine selection. I just go online, answer a few quick questions about what I like, what I don't like that week, and their experts curate a selection of award-winning wines tailored to my taste. You get to choose how often you receive your wine, and every single selection is backed by First Leaf's 100% satisfaction guarantee. First Leaf's monthly wine club has made my wine shopping experience much easier than it used to be. I no longer have to wander around a giant wine store guessing at what I'm going to like based on the bottle. Now, I love sharing great wine with my family and friends, and I know you will too. So give First Leaf a try and head over to tryfirstleaf.com/NBA show to sign up and save 50% on your first 6 bottles plus free shipping. That's tryfirstleaf.com, tryfirstleaf.com/NBA show to save 50% on your first 6 bottles plus free shipping. Tryfirstleaf.com/NBA show.
All right, we are back. Eric made the wise veteran choice and headed for his bed for some middle of the day napping after a late night covering Heat Bucks. But Slater, let's keep it moving in the West. Lakers Grizzlies with Warriors Kings coming up next in our discussion. Another incredible game. Butler stole the night in terms of the Heat Bucks game, but LeBron, even if he wasn't 38 years old, coming up with 20, 20, and 7, or was it 22? in a as much of a must-win game, I think, as you can have to get a 3-1 series lead. And I only say that because, the Grizzlies have home court down the stretch and in the series. And you got an older Lakers team that is now facing a schedule that is one day off between each game. You've got Anthony Davis on the offensive side of the floor being wildly inconsistent. And to watch LeBron, especially with all these subplots in this series, with Dylan Brooks popping off, calling him old, poking the bear, John Morant being hurt, to his credit, playing through this hand injury, and everything that came with it. To watch, it was not a one-man show like Jimmy was with Miami for the most part. It was LeBron doing LeBron things, but hitting the glass in an incredible way. And that supporting cast, most of which did not have Laker jerseys on if you go back to January. So shout out Rob Pelinka, who did a great job at the trade deadline. The Rui Hachimuras of the world, the Austin Reeves, incredible game. Lakers had to have it, up 3-1. What'd you think of that ball game?
Where LeBron's and Jimmy Butler's supporting cast is similar is the underperforming big man. You mentioned, you kind of glossed over Davis there. I thought he had a bad game. And I know that there was, he's fighting through stuff. He went down.
He was bad defensively. I'm going to steal a stat. I'm sorry, offensively. I'm stealing a stat that I did just pick up watching an ESPN show. I think it was the Grizzlies were around 2 of 18 at the rim with AD. He's given him that defensive presence. He had a big block late. But
he's an elite rim protector. Just being down there, I think, even if he's not coming over to contest, people are just more hesitant to go down there. So, look, his presence is always helpful. I think Jaren Jackson was a better rim protector last. I know more.
He was a beast.
Yeah. How about that block he had that set up the Morant feed to Bane, where you thought Memphis had pulled it out potentially, which sets up, to me, the biggest shot of the game, obviously. Down to, that was a tough shot by LeBron. He's beaten Xavier Tillman, who, it's interesting the Grizzlies are having Xavier Tillman, not Dylan Brooks, in the, ultimate moment of the game, last possession, need to stop. It's Tillman guarding LeBron. LeBron takes him to the rim, and it is Jackson coming over. Jackson, who just spiked a shot. And you see how high LeBron had to put that off the glass as he's falling out.
He called it a tier 3 layup and talked about it's something he practices, and the idea that you're throwing that thing well above the square.
Classic LeBron post game. But
listen, we're gonna get into this in a minute. At least his ass does.
At least he spoke.
Yes. My God, I'm so tired of these dudes running from microphones.
I actually want to wind you up on that one in a little bit. So, but let's go to the Lakers side for right now. That thing kissed high, top right of the board. But yeah, that shot was big. D'Angelo Russell's 2 threes, and I know LeBron mentioned
3 threes.
3 threes. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. You're right. Russell, I think, has been a mild disappointment. That trade was so good in so many ways. You saw Vanderbilt was great to start the game. I know the Hachimura wasn't part of that trade, but he was good as an addition. Malik Beasley's kind of, floated out of the rotation, but Russell hasn't had many terrific moments, but he, if he doesn't have that sequence, and that is what he's known for, right? He'll randomly get hot in spurts of a game and give you a 9-0 run. He did it at a crucial moment of the season, which, I'm not saying that makes his entire second tenure with the Lakers a success, but that was big.
No, but that's the whole point, right? If you go back to the trade deadline and you got a guy who he didn't win that playoff game on his own, but you lose it without those shots. And that is the thing. And the idea and the narrative is that LeBron does have some help here, and to survive a game where AD was disastrous and a total no-show offensively is big. I don't know where they go from here. The Grizzlies are still so damn potent. And like you said, Jaren Jackson playing really well, Desmond Bane having a massive kind of, load on his shoulders on both ends of the floor, but finally hitting some shots last night. I'm trying to look here. He ended up with 36. My goodness.
He was 36. Good. And, he hadn't been. Warrior series last year, he was dealing with it seemed like back spasms or something, but he had a really quiet series. And up until game 4, you didn't, they need offense so bad, right? Where they have that 9-point first quarter. And it had to be Bane. He's their shot maker. He needs to be their floor spacer.
Almost 47 minutes, by the way. Almost played the entire damn game. 46 minutes, 47 seconds. Ja Morant, 44 minutes. Ja's 8 of 24 from the field. And, I don't know what direction you want to take this here. There's a lot to unpack. Ja late, it's so much fun to watch. He's an incredible ball player, man. But two things come to mind. This discussion and this continued reality where they are one team with Ja on the floor and different when when he didn't play earlier. Like he's incredible, but then you see him jump 13 feet in the air and just ignore the fact that LeBron is clearly sitting there ready to take the charge and go down to the floor in the same exact way that got him hurt in the first place. He re-injured that hand a couple times during the game. Anybody who watches this game and wants the guys to make the most of their talent, you hope he can play 20 years. When you look at that game, and it's just this continued idea that like somebody has got to convince him to tweak his style a little bit. He's not going to last 10 years playing like this.
Yeah, it's difficult though. For what makes you great, like you don't want to, neuter that. I dealt with it a little bit, a very smaller version of it, I guess you'd say, but covering James Wiseman, his first couple of years with the Warriors, how did he get injured? He went up for an alley-oop, a kind of ambitious alley-oop. He came down on his wrist, hurt his wrist. It really stalled out his rookie year. Then obviously he later in the year comes back. He goes up for a pick and roll, monster poster dunk, gets knocked off balance and tears his meniscus. That took away like a year and a half early on. And I know part of the post injury process as they were trying to get him back to health was like, how do you land, talk about different landing spots, which dunk should you go for, not go for. And, there are much higher profile players in history. Michael Jordan, I believe, is one who early in his career. Dwayne Wade for sure is one. Remember, fall down 8 times, get up, or fall down 7, get up 8. Yep. He was a crash dummy. A lot of these, superstar players in their early 20s are crash dummies. And then Dwayne Wade needs to sharpen up that, 18-foot bank shot. Remember how he then became such a good mid-range shooter. And that's probably the next phase for Ja, like trust the floater more, trust the bank shot more, trust the finesse a little bit more. But, I covered Russell Westbrook, and Russell Westbrook was an insane crash dummy when he was that age. And there was a lot of wondering when the next big injury will come, sadly. And he did have some knee trouble early in his career, but generally he stayed healthy through it all. And I don't know. It's a challenge. Like, can't just be like, hey, Ja, play like Mike Conley. Like, you can't do that.
Those are valid points. And so maybe I went too macro. I mean, but in the micro, you've got what is coming. I give him credit. He's playing through a lot of pain. You can see it on his face. You would think you would at least, temper it down a tiny bit in the scope of that one game. And I will say this before I think I love you, brother. I think you might have missed your chance to get me riled up on the Grizzlies post-game stuff. I don't know if I have the energy. Like, I'll start here. Basketball wise,
Sam, what do you think about players?
No, hold on.
Don't speak after losses.
Basketball wise, the reality is with no Steven Adams, with no Brandon Clark, the Grizzlies in what they do is severely hindered. So if they end up losing this series, it does make a lot of basketball sense to me, combined with this Lakers team that got deeper at the deadline, that defensively is tough, and elephant in the room, Dylan Brooks's continued offensive deficiencies, just creating an absolute nightmare for Taylor Jenkins and his staff. And the idea that with a guy like Ja, who wants nothing more than to have some open lanes and to be able to see the rim, that nobody's guarding Dylan and it's getting mucked up in the lane every single time down the floor. He's not hitting the open threes. You get to the off-court stuff. I mean, listen, I got recency bias. Maybe, like, can you think of another playoff instance where a somewhat prominent player talked this level of mess and then failed so miserably to back it up? And then on top of that, compounded the optics by doing a couple things. First of all, consecutive games, not doing media. And I'm going to hesitate to go too far down that road because the fans don't care that much. They do a little bit, but that does matter when you talk, and they're being accused of being front runners by their fellow players, not by the media. We just did a player poll and all kinds of players referred to them as front runners. So then Dylan and Ja don't talk post game. That part's not new. When they lost to the Warriors during rivalry week earlier this year, we've talked about this. Like, this is kind of, Ja often doesn't talk after losses. The optics are just to the point where all around the league, people are, I think, looking at him sideways in that regard. But in terms of Dylan, I can't think of a guy who talked this much. And then you not only are losing the matchup, to watch LeBron literally take him driving left, which Dylan had boasted a couple weeks back that he knew LeBron's game, that LeBron never wants to drive left. There was obviously something incredibly poetic about LeBron choosing to drive left and finishing over Dylan Brooks and letting out that kind of primal scream. It put a kind of a bow on their little one-on-one matchup, at least to this point. It's wild. I mean, Dylan, I don't know what he could have said after the game last night. There's nothing he can't say.
Yeah, but how it's, I guess, a weird way to look at it, but how you handle losses, I think in a lot of ways, tells the world if you're ready to win and win at the highest level. You know what I mean? Just like the maturity with which you handle a defeat, can, exemplify to the world. Like if I think professionally you're ready to take that next leap. And you wondered if the humbling of the second round last season from the Warriors would change the way that the Grizzlies operate, would kind of mature them in that sense, or organizationally, but also individually. But we've talked all season how we didn't really think it did. Now they still got the second seed. They still are obviously extremely talented. They, if LeBron just misses that floater last night, which he easily could have, it's 2-2 going back to Memphis, and you probably favor the Grizzlies. So sure, they could still win this series also. But I think we continue to see that they just don't appear ready for the brightest of lights.
Listen, that conversation that you just framed well, I like, and I think it's fair, and I think it's substantive. We're not just sitting here taking shots because guys didn't do media. There's a bigger picture in play, which is go ahead and prove the fans and the media wrong. Go ahead, because right now it definitely appears that the Grizzlies organization is not, from a cultural standpoint, building something that is sustainable for the long haul. It feels very much from a leadership standpoint, from a personality standpoint, in terms of the way they move, that they are making the most of some incredibly talented dudes who they brought to town, and that the runway might be much shorter than it could be because of their ethos, if you will. And I do think
lack of accountability kind of comes to mind.
100%. And I don't know. I mean, listen, I think everybody is fair to be in the spotlight. Robert Parra, the owner, Zach Kleiman, the GM, Taylor Jenkins, the coach. We're not behind the scenes. We don't see everything. But this pattern and this trend of like you said, the lack of accountability, and I'm talking on court, talking off court. It's just incredible to me. If you just, because the stuff we do know, the stuff we are experts at in our field is the PR, right? Like, we can speak on that. I'm not going to sit here and tell Taylor Jenkins how to run his team, but the PR we know. And the idea that they can't even compel their players to talk post game, given the headlines of this year, to just get everybody to just get with the program, that you are part of this league, and this is how things work, so that we can, as an organization, avoid continued criticism that goes beyond the basketball. That is the part that confuses me, because the people I know who are the highest level in PR in their fields in sports media or in sports PR, like, those are the types of things they focus on. Like, hey, coach, hey, GM, I'm not getting into your lane, but there's a few things you could tweak here and there to help with the headlines, help with the optics, help with the conversation. Because the conversation after that game should be pretty simple. It should be, LeBron was great. Lakers got some help from D'Angelo Russell. Grizzlies continue to deal with the losses of Steven Adams, Brandon Clark. Dylan Brooks needs to hit a few shots. That's kind of all the Grizzlies need the conversation to be. Instead, yet again, it is the, like, man, like, these dudes, and that's what I think I would like to assume they would like to get away from. It doesn't seem like they do, though.
Yeah, I'd look to win. I think you need to correct mistakes. To correct mistakes, you need to kind of accept mistakes that's the accountability aspect of it.
Well, and
not
Kendrick
making
Perkins
it.
tweeted last night, and that's where you and I are cut the same way, where we're humble enough to say we didn't play the game at any kind of high level. But when you see former players speak out on it, Kendrick Perkins, Jay Williams, two guys this morning that had something to say about that, then you at least feel like as a reporter that you're not crazy, you're not out of pocket. And I think that is where the conversation is right now.
Yeah. And they have an interesting summer ahead, especially with the Dylan Brooks contract, right?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, good stuff. We'll see if the Lakers can finish that off.
So that series, and this will allow you to segue us, is lined up with Warriors Kings, setting up what I think is going to be a fantastic second round series to come out of this little bracket, but we still don't know who's going to be on the other side.
Indeed. Tough news for the Kings on Monday when it gets reported by our Shams Charania that De'Aaron Fox has a fracture in the index finger of his left shooting hand. Game 5 is coming on Wednesday. And, you and I later today are, I believe, going to go out to Kings practice and try to get some sense of how they're feeling.
It'll be one of those iPhone practices. That's what I call them, right? The practices where you go in, you're looking for a certain player, and everybody's, busting the phone out and wanting to take a video and all that. So
today's show is brought to you by our friends at Chime. Visit chime.com/NBA show for more information. Do your financial goals feel out of reach? Well, they don't have to. With Chime's secured credit builder Visa credit card, you can start building credit with your own money through on-time payments and small everyday purchases like groceries, streaming, and even gas. Members see an increase of 30 points to their credit scores on average. Chime reports your payments to the major credit bureaus, and it helps you build your credit over time. It's super easy, and all with no annual fees, large security deposits, or credit checks to apply. Start making your financial dreams a reality with Chime. Signing up only takes 2 minutes and doesn't affect your credit score. Get started at chime.com/NBA show. That's chime.com/NBA show. The Chime Credit Builder Visa credit card is issued by Stride Bank N.A. pursuant to a license from Visa USA Chime checking account, and $200 qualifying direct deposit required to apply for the secured Chime Credit Builder Visa credit card. Regular on-time payment history can have a positive impact on your credit score. Impact to score may vary, and some users' scores may not improve. Out-of-network ATM withdrawal fees may apply except at MoneyPass ATMs, in a 7-Eleven, or any Allpoint or Visa Plus Alliance ATM.
Oh, man, look who we got on the line here. We got our special guest. I didn't put his name out in the streets because I didn't want people to get excited and then get let down. But we have the one and only Vinny Goodwill from Yahoo Sports coming at you from a hotel, I think in L.A. What's up, my friend?
It is LA, at least for the next few hours. I will be headed to Sacramento shortly.
Oh, you coming up? Okay. Man, all right.
Well, let's set that game 5 up then.
Yeah, we can. We'll kind of jam in your thoughts on Lakers Grizzlies here in a minute, Vinny. We're kind of on the back end of the pod, but this is a fantastic surprise. You know what, Slater? Hold on. We're gonna get to Kings Warriors real quick because it's fresh. Lakers Grizzlies. You were there last night, and we've unpacked a lot of it. I told Slater that I wouldn't let him get me riled up on Memphis and everything that comes with that experience, but I failed and I did get riled up. So you kind of missed that little rant. But the series itself, and I guess I'll start with LeBron's greatness. You wrote a column about the idea that Dylan Brooks is not wrong, that LeBron is old. He's right about that, but about every other damn thing, he got it wrong. Like, what was last night like?
You ever feel like the other team made a player have a great game?
Oh,
not
sure,
that
yeah.
Not that the player was just singularly great, but the other team played so dumb it played into the great player's hands. He just happened to take it. That's what it felt like last night because the Grizzlies did everything they could to lose the game. Like, Taylor Jenkins, the Grizzlies coach, he called it a character game. He said, we're at our best when we play with swagger and confidence. And some players played like that. Like Desmond Bane, until he ran out of gas. Like Desmond Bane ran out of gas by the end of the night. But when he hit that 3 to put them up 7, we hadn't heard from LeBron throughout that game. Like, if it wasn't for D'Angelo Russell, and this is not give D'Angelo Russell all the credit, but none of that stuff would have ever happened if D'Angelo Russell didn't hit 9 straight and sort of rescue the Lakers out of the spot that they were in. This wasn't your traditional LeBron tour de force game. But he does recognize if a game's there for the taking, Why not take it? And that's kind of, I felt like what he did. And the Grizzlies are just, put it like this: your Sacramento Kings are what we thought the Grizzlies would be this year, as far as the confidence, the moxie, being able to go toe to toe with an established team, and to not lose games just by being dumb. Sacramento has lost 2 games, but they haven't lost 2 games by being dumb. The Grizzlies have lost 2 games by and large, or at least 1 game, by being dumb.
Highlight that more, Vinny. What's your short list of plays that come to the forefront of your mind?
For me, it's gonna sound really silly, but the D'Angelo Russell, the first 3, for Jaren Jackson to be switched out on him, and Austin Reeves drives, and Jaren Jackson, who loves going for the shot block, just puts himself in no man's land, right? He was not in a position to defend the pass, not in a position to block a shot, and he leaves D'Angelo Russell open. Now, to be fair, Russell has not played well this series, right? So you leave him open, the floodgates open, he hits 9 straight. Then the LeBron play where he gets the layup to push the game into overtime. He wants to drive right. And I get that he has Xavier Tillman on him, and Xavier's a bigger player. He's more 5 playing 4 as opposed to 4 playing 4. But where's your help? Dylan Brooks slides over, but gets caught in no man's land. Like, just certain game plan mistakes coming out of timeouts that the attention to detail says to me that they're not ready. And the whole Dylan Brooks experience, forget him not talking. Let's just focus on Dylan Brooks on the floor. The dumb things that he does, getting riled up, letting the Staples Center crowd get in his head and everything else. Like, you can't have that level of distraction when you're trying to overcome huge losses on your personnel and you're defending, one of the game's best players in LeBron. Like, you can't let those things happen. So those are just 3 things in a multitude of them, and some coaching mistakes too, because Luke Kennard wasn't on the floor when you needed 3-point shooting, and you were 9 of 42 from 3, and your best 3-point shooter is on the bench for most of the game.
Yeah. How about Dylan Brooks' just like general view of his offensive game? And like, that is a season-long, career-long.
You said his
version of what you're talking about.
Offensive game. Does he have an offensive game?
In his mind, he does, and that's the problem, right? I mean, like, this idea that he is like a Patrick Beverly, a Draymond Green type mold. It's like those guys accept what they are offensively. He doesn't.
Yeah, he's in a weird spot, or the Grizzlies are in a weird spot with him, right? Because Ja's going to be Ja, and if you're going to be in the Ja Morant business, you need someone steady next to him, at least in my opinion. And Dylan Brooks is neither a great shooter nor a great athlete, but he is a great defender. I did put him on one of my all-defense teams, and I have no regrets about that. But the wildness and the fluctuations in how he plays, especially offensively, he takes some of that stuff away. When you take dumb shots and you force the cross-matching on the other end, you're giving a Lakers team that's honestly not very good a lot of advantages that they wouldn't have otherwise. And if Dylan Brooks played a little bit smarter, and I know that's an oxymoron, Dylan Brooks playing smart, but if he took advantage of the opportunities in front of him as opposed to trying to dictate the game on his own terms, he'd be a lot better off.
Like, hey, Ja, come over here for a DHO instead of like, let me get mine right now.
It's Dylan Brooks time, baby. That's what time it is.
So he's second on I'm looking at it here. He's second on the team in this series in threes. That's a mistake. 22.2%. Only Desmond is shooting more, and Ja is right below him. And we talked a lot, Vinny, about the maturity stuff, and I kind of like your Kings parallel. I'll be honest, it's a lot for me to wrap my head around because I'm just so programmed to think that Kings represents dysfunction and all that type of stuff. But they are, to their credit right now, we can kind of segue into that series. The Kings are rolling with what they have and who they are, and they're letting the results, good or bad, speak for themselves. That is the personality difference between these two teams. As Slater and I have talked about, and he's obviously got such a good read on Mike Brown from his time with the Warriors and Slater being around him. Mike Brown and that team, like when let's compare Dylan Brooks, Draymond Green, two guys who want to poke the bear all the time. Mike Brown has told the Kings, do not engage with that man. Like, stop talking to him. Don't do exactly what Dylan Brooks did to the Lakers. It doesn't mean they're going to win the series. Doesn't mean it's going to work. I do think that down the road, you talk about organizational culture, maturity, sustainability, the length of your runway. it's a better formula than what the Grizzlies are. Just like, we're going to burn hot and bright for as long as we can, and it ain't going to be that long. And Ja's going to try to jump 15 feet in the air and hope he doesn't break his leg. And Dylan's going to, average 7 threes a game. It's just wild how they are attacking their thing. And yeah, the contrast to the Kings is pretty fascinating.
Well, for me, I would respect the Grizzlies a lot more if they stay consistent with who they are. If you're going to be brash and confident and cocky and talk all types of, can I cuss on here?
Yeah, let it rip.
Talk all types of shit. Then be that way all the time, right? If you're down 3-1, you still gonna say, hey, we think we're the better team. We got 2 games left on our home floor, that sort of thing. Like, stay true to your character, be who you are. The Kings, I feel like, are more consistent to who they are. I don't think they don't engage with Draymond Green, but they don't shy away from him either. I've definitely felt like they baited Draymond Green. Like, they kept needling him and needling him and needling him. And then, not like he snapped, but you put him in a position. You hold, you grab, you clutch, you play basketball. Right. And if you know that person is a little more, susceptible to losing his cool, that's fine. But we're doing things on our terms. Mike Brown says, don't get engaged with him verbally. But it doesn't mean you don't tweak him on the floor. It
100%.
doesn't mean that you try to bring out the worst attributes in him to put him in situations where he may react. And I felt like that's what they did to their advantage, which I have zero problem with. And even in game 4, I know that there's a lot of people that's going to have a lot of quibbles with the way things maybe ended. But I felt like from the last possession, from the moment that they were down 10 to end the third quarter, they stayed the course and stayed true to who they were. We're going to play fast. We're going to play De'Aaron Fox. We're going to play Malik Monk. Like, they have a confidence in who they are. For there to be very little sweat equity in terms of playoff basketball, guys, they act like they've been here before. They're not straying from, you can have a bad game. Everybody has a bad game, but they don't seem like they're straying from their own ethos in this series. Like, they're not going to beat themselves in that way. They may, like you said, they may lose the series, but they'll lose the series on their terms if they lose.
Right. Yeah, and the grit that you're talking about is there. When Draymond stands over Keegan Murray and I think tells him some version of get the hell up, and he was giving Keegan a hard time for staying on the ground pretty long early in that game 4, who's in his face? De'Aaron's in his face. Like, De'Aaron actually stuck up for his guy. And so when they need to, they're doing that. But the chirping on the bench, they're keeping to a minimum. And listen, they showed that fight in the fourth quarter. I texted a buddy of mine who's a Kings fan. He hit me after the third quarter. Oh man, this is not good. They're down 10. And I wrote back like, they're cooked. Like, that's a wrap. And they came out like gangbusters from there.
You hear Mike post game too. I mean, he was kind of critical of some of their sloppiness or over aggressiveness in transition, and saying they were just driving into 2 guys and begging for fouls. They want them to play fast, but they need to be smarter with all that. There's also, again, what we were talking about with the Grizzlies earlier. I just think there's a level of accountability. Like, even after a game like that, what must they clean up? And he's coming out, he's telling the public, which means we know he's telling his team.
Yeah, and that was very Sabonis specific, that criticism, I think. And meanwhile, we keep doing the contrast, but like, Taylor Jenkins, if I hear him say one more time that our swag is what got us here, like, cool. Like, I don't know, that's not exactly putting your guys in a position to win. Vinny, the Fox injury is massive. I've mentioned before you hopped on that we're going to go to practice this afternoon. Excuse me. I don't know how quick your flight is. Are we going to see you there? You making it up for this thing?
My flight, I don't think isn't until 4.
And we got to go to practice in like 2.5 hours, and he's chilling in a room right now. I don't think he's
fair enough. I didn't do the math, but there's not a long list of dudes who have played through this injury. The one guy that has most famously is the one and only, the legend Kobe Bryant.
A maniac.
2010. Yeah, maniac.
Respectfully, a maniac.
Yes. And I looked it up last night. I mean, 2010 championship run. I remember it. I covered it. That was my first year as a national writer. Covered that whole thing. I think that finger had a little something to do with him shooting 6 of 24 in game 7 against the Celtics. But he got that finger injury. I want to say, I think it was December 11th, like early. Doesn't miss a damn game. Doesn't miss any games at all. I think the next game he missed was February 6th from that point on. And later talked at the time, Lakers beat writer Kevin Ding, now with the Lakers, had chronicled how Kobe had, after that season, he had arthritis concerns, long-term concerns about the finger. So to your point, Vinny, just a guy who was cut different more than anybody else. So, do we think, I do think Fox will most likely give it a shot. We'll get more of a sense at practice today, but in terms of handicap and where this goes from here, how do you see it?
It's so disappointing, man. You know what I mean? There is nothing more exhilarating as a viewer of NBA basketball for my entire life, or even as a journalist, than watching a young, exuberant team go after a champion. And not even has to be like defending champion, but just an established team. And I felt like the Kings were up to a challenge in a way. And I said it before the series started. I said, everybody angling to get to 6. You'll mess around and be in for a rude awakening, because I don't think this is going to be some easy win. You know what I mean? They're not some jobber. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is not, this ain't the BK Brawler or something like that in the WWF, like some dude that's just going to be out here taking a L. And I felt like with 2 of the last 3 games on their home floor, yeah, the odds still say the Warriors come up with something, right? But I'd rather see them get beat than something like this happen. And I'm not going to go into, the litany of things, because health always is a concern in the playoffs. Luck is always something that occurs. But when you see the engine to this, and I didn't vote Fox, I think I voted Fox on my 3rd team, but I put Sabonis as 5th on my MVP ballot, right? Just because as a hub and everything running around him and stuff like that. But in this series, this is a De'Aaron Fox series. You know what I mean? He's the guy that you're game planning for.
I think he's more of an answer for playoff star. To be on this series, I think he's more like, if they actually want to get to the next level, it's like Sabonis is who he is, right? And I think there is limitations playoff wise. But what you're saying, I think like Fox will elevate them to the next level, and was.
Well, just the position he plays. You know what I mean? Like the position he plays, the speed, the advantage, the fact that it's a guard's game, and you're cutting his finger off. Like literally, you know what I mean? Like you're cutting a huge part of what he does off. And I think, he's a gamer. He'll try to play. They may, shoot it up or something like that. But dude, I tried to play on a broken wrist before. That ain't easy. I won't say that ain't easy. That's impossible. I didn't realize it was broken. I was playing on adrenaline until like 3 o'clock in the morning. I said, "Oh shit, this really hurts," and I went to the hospital. And
now you got 1 day between games. I mean, if they survive a game 7, you're talking 1 day: Wednesday, Friday, Sunday.
No, I mean, how do you guys handicap it? That doesn't seem realistic, right? Is it just more shots for Malik Monk?
One thing I will say with this team from this year, it's avulsion. They're calling it an avulsion fracture of his left index finger, which is different than a right thumb for a left-handed player, because Sabonis and Fox are both left-handed, so you'd prefer it on your right hand. But Sabonis got an avulsion fracture in his right thumb this season, missed a game, came back. Well, what, 3-4 days later, Sam?
Yep.
And really has not, like, I have not once this season been like, oh,
bird.
But it's also, I mean, the shooting hand thing. Like that's
no doubt.
And
this is what we don't know. Like, how bad is it? What are the levels of it? The play it seemed to happen was 4 minutes left. He was really good down the stretch. You're right. Like adrenaline wears off, swells up, whatever. To me, it's not completely out of the question that we're watching game 5. Like, doesn't look like, we can't really tell how much it's affected him, or maybe he doesn't even play. And it's
does potentially it creates a great playoff moment. If he plays well, then he's got a little bit of a legend that he's creating. We'll see. But I'm with you, Vinny, in the idea that in a perfect world, we hate when this health stuff gets in the way. And even, we were breaking down Bucks Heat, and Jimmy was incredible. The Heat win that game, but I wish Giannis was 100%, like he had a thing 6 minutes to go in the game where
I wish Giannis had a functional coach. A living, breathing coach.
He should have been on the first part of the pod. I don't know that we can go down this road right now.
Well, and this is coach related as well. And I'm beating this horse to death. This whole Memphis Kings comparison. I think about Fox, and let's just, I guess, pull a few takeaways, regardless of what happens in this series. Things we have learned. A couple years back, our buddy, our friend, our colleague, Amin Elasan,
I know you were going.
like And he was right at the time. He was right.
Yep.
Famously said that Ja Morant is who De'Aaron Fox thinks he is. And Kings fans were not happy. And now we have an interesting, timeline parallel between what's happening with Ja, what's happening with De'Aaron. The one thing that I want to hyper focus on is in terms of accountability, leadership, coaching, all those things. Every single time Mike Brown talks about De'Aaron Fox, he reminds people that he's got to get better defensively, even when he's pretty damn good. And he's pushing him to be a two-way player. De'Aaron, to his credit, has been wide open ears, keeping his mouth shut for the most part, and has been incredibly coachable. And then it does not feel like with John Taylor and what they're doing out there, that just feels like just let it ride. Whatever he gives me. I mean, the other day, I forget if it was Desmond or Dylan. I think it was Desmond. One of his teammates in the media stuff highlighted that we need more from Ja on the defensive end. Like, your teammates should not have to be, spotlighting that. And it's another distinct difference between the two. So for Fox, I hope he can get out there, hoping to do his thing. He's been incredible. That crowd, you'll see, Vinny, it's going to be pretty lit on game 5. I mean,
that's soft behavior, in my opinion. You must feel it as everyone else in the building feels.
Should I take some Tylenol before the game? Should I do
that? Here's the irony. The only person in the arena who I will not judge for having earplugs in is De'Aaron Fox's young son, Rain, who wears the headphones when his wife or say holds him courtside. So that is acceptable. I've never been able to kind of bite the bullet and put the old earplugs in. Some old head sports writers in the past I've seen do it. I'm probably going to regret it when I'm older and can't hear a damn thing. But it is loud, and I've made this joke on the pod before. Like, I've never seen my Apple Watch. It's a very bougie example, but my Apple Watch constantly tells me that the environment's too loud when I'm at a Kings game. So yeah, it'll be wild. We'll just see if they can do something.
That is very first world, Sam.
I know. Let's talk about that, Vinny. Let's have one of our conversations.
off wax. No, I'm looking forward to seeing this tomorrow. And I wanted to hit your point on Ja and De'Aaron. I'm curious about what you guys think. Mike Brown says that stuff to De'Aaron, and De'Aaron can sort of take it. He says it in private, then he says it in public. When coaches and players sort of say that about Ja, I wonder if that's like a last resort. If that's like hey, we're poking, we're prodding, we're saying it privately, and you're not getting it. So now we're going to say it publicly, and we're going to say it a little more harshly. Or is there a communication disconnect? I feel like it's more of a communication disconnect all the way around there. And I'm wondering if Taylor Jenkins knows how to get to Ja. Hell, does anybody know how to get to Ja?
That's the thing. I mean, it's been the year that's been the story of the year. Can anybody get to Ja?
The one thing
go ahead.
I'll just say there's a big difference between the two. I think Fox is in year 6. What's Ja in maybe year 4? Ja's 23, Fox is 25. Fox has really experienced the basement of the league, several coaches, several failed situations. Yeah. I think he was finally at a point of his career hey, I want a coach to come in here and correct this because it has been so bad. Ja has experienced so much success early. I think that's led to hey, I'm already doing it right. Look at what I've already ascended to. So I think that's a bit of a difference.
But isn't it creating potentially an identity crisis for their team in terms of planning, in terms of roster construction? Because you go to last year when the numbers were incredible in terms of how good they were without him. They're competing with the Warriors in the playoffs without him. That's the fork in the road that is unfortunate because they have such a talented team. But if they can't get, enough of that two-way mentality in Ja, then can all those pieces coalesce in the kind of way that they should? I don't know. Because I do think let's go ahead and handicap it. Let's say they bow out to the Lakers in this first round. Now you're in the offseason. Every team, what do they do at that point? They reassess, where are we going? How does this look? And you have a superstar who is as box office as anybody in the NBA. That's, if you use that term, it's Ja Morant. But if they are not, merging those two things well enough, then I don't know what it looks like. It felt last year, guys, like Memphis was going to contend for the next 10 years, and maybe they still do. But I think it's a little bit on the knife's edge right now.
Look, there are two players who've done real winning at that height in that sort of slight build, right? Two guys in NBA history, just two, Isaiah Thomas and Steph Curry. And those are two vastly different players, but you can see the archetype of how you can build around them. But those two players, even Steph, though he had his early struggles defensively, he's committed now. You know what I mean? Like, he's committed, on that end. Ja reminds me of Allen Iverson, Russell Westbrook. And if those guys were your best players, whether it was a guards league or not, there's a ceiling on how high you can go if everything revolves around those dudes. The way that you have to build your team, the type of scores you can't have around them because they demand so much oxygen. You got to have some real questions, I think. Like, I wonder if Jaren Jackson has to be more of a focus for Memphis moving forward as far as how they move their program. Can you keep Dylan Brooks around? Desmond Bane looked like a grown man for 40 minutes last night until his tank just went on E. Understandably went on E, but what is his ceiling? I think organizationally, Memphis has a lot of questions because this Western Conference ain't getting no easier.
Right.
As things,
right.
Move along and progress. Like, this was a down year, but it was just a down year. It ain't a down 5 years.
Right. Slater, let's finish here. We've somehow gotten deep into the pod and not really talked about the Warriors at all. They show that championship medal in Game 4. It never gets old watching the genius of Draymond defensively, and so I can't get over the way he played that last look and just looking at Harrison Barnes and telling him, like, I know who you are. Go ahead and shoot that shot. Like, that was just absolutely brutal, and it worked. Where do you think they're at right now, especially with the Fox News giving them a little kind of emotional edge?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't think they are happy about the Fox News. And I know, from the people I've talked to post that coming out, there's been like he's playing. Like, their belief and their scouting in the, right now is like, we're still scouting for De'Aaron Fox. We're still scouting for a good De'Aaron Fox. If suddenly it's Davion Mitchell for 42 minutes and Malik Monk's the backup point guard, I think they're okay with that being the situation and them being under prepared for that than if Fox shows up. So, confidence, I think they would have had confidence that they're going to get one in that building regardless. That can ebb good and bad. That might mean Klay Thompson's coming out like, this is my, Game 5 is the Klay Thompson game, and he shoots 8 threes in the first quarter. Maybe he makes 7 of them. Maybe he makes 1 of them. And, that's just kind of who they've been this season. But man, there was such a sigh of relief that they closed that game the other night. Not just because, you don't want to be down 3-1, but if Harrison Barnes hits that 3, not only do you have, the former guy you kicked to the curb that is just stomping around the arena thinking he ended the dynasty, but how bad would that Steph Curry timeout situation have looked in retrospect? How bad would that, Steve Kerr's decision making down the stretch, even to use that challenge? So much of what went wrong down the stretch is viewed so differently because Harrison Barnes missed that shot. So I just can't even imagine. I mean, did you go to the end of the Warriors locker room post game, or you were mostly on the Kings side?
I was on the Kings side.
They were just laughing and talking about, oh man, imagine if Harrison made that. And I was just like trying to take my mind into an alternate reality. If Harrison did make that, like, what is the vibe of that locker room?
It's not even just the timeout. It's Steph going too early. And it's funny. I listened to Draymond's pod, which, for the second straight year in a row has become something that's part of my job during the playoffs. And he highlighted the fact, for one, they all fell on the sword for Steph. Steve said it was his fault. Draymond said it was his fault. But he also, I thought this was fascinating, talked about how, and he wasn't being critical of Steph, but he goes, listen, when you make a mistake like that, you're going to be in your head a little bit. So he recognized that, like, Steph going too early, that was Steph being shook. That was Steph sitting there probably thinking to himself, I cannot believe what I just did. So yeah, if they drop that game, a whole lot of media, Bay Area and beyond, was going to be in the unique circumstance of like killing Steph Curry, which never happens. I mean, the guy's Teflon for the most part, but that was a bad night at the office. They escape, and now they're in a great spot. I do think Game 5 wise, this is a team that's been terrible on the road all year long. But those were competitive games in 1 and 2. It didn't look like a team that just can't function on the road. It would not shock me to see the Warriors just finally completely wake up on the road and put a game together. And the last thought for me on the Kings side, you mentioned Klay, and does Klay have a bust out game? It's funny, when Kevin Huerter got drafted by the Hawks, Travis Schlenk, former Warriors executive who already had Trae Young, and this is an inexact comp, but like there was a degree of him viewing Kevin Huerter as their Klay Thompson, and that Trey was their Steph Curry. And Kevin has had a wonderful year for this Kings team, and he's a guy who can just get on, stretches and heat up and do what Malik Monk does and then some. He's had a tough series, a really tough series. He's staying on the floor because he is doing a little bit defensively, getting a few boards here and there. So he's like, I feel like he's been on the edge of almost losing his spot, but he's not
21 minutes last game. Only 21.
21. Yeah. I think he's shooting, make sure I got this right. I think it's 15% from three in the series. Like they can't have him, not have any moments. He's had a couple here and there, but that's another guy who I think is under the spotlight for this game.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, I'm going to let us go on that. Vinny, I appreciate you, man. I know you had things happening in LA this morning. You're jumping on planes. I'm very excited. I didn't know you were coming this way. That's fantastic.
I didn't know either until Sunday.
I like it.
Me and you both are shocked. I thought I was going home for a day.
That's well. So I'm excited to see you. You are not excited to see me. That's how it is.
I look forward to seeing you, Samick. I get in at late afternoon today, so hopefully you can let me know where there's something to eat.
No question. All right, Vinny, I got you. Slater, thank you, brother. And to the listeners, as always, we'll talk to you next week.